I never expected you to become so successful. You really are my daughter. I'm so proud of you."
When I was 12 years old, my mother, who had a sick younger sister, vanished without a trace. We had no contact and I didn't even know where she was, but one day, after I became an adult, she suddenly showed up at my workplace. It seems she had accidentally found out that I graduated at the top of my class from medical school. And now, she came back to use me, after abandoning me once. What now, after all this time, on her own terms? The sight of my mother trying to cozy up to me now that I'm well known was revolting, and I even felt nauseated. The reason I wanted to become a doctor was to reduce the number of people suffering from illnesses like my sister. Not to gain my mother's approval. Please go back. You are no longer someone who has nothing to do with me. I firmly declined, and my mother seemed taken aback by my resolute attitude. While I didn't want anything to do with my mother, I was worried about my sister and wondered if there was any way I could examine her. As I looked at my sister, she was silent, but her eyes clearly pleaded for help. Seeing that, I impulsively pulled my sister's wheelchair and dashed into a nearby empty examination room.
Wow, Rachel, it's been so hard.
As soon as we entered the examination room, my sister burst into tears as if cutting loose. I was speechless at the story of the last 14 years she shared. I decided I wouldn't let our mother have her way anymore. What I did next was, my name is Rachel. At 26, as a newcomer to the workforce, I am leading a busy yet happy life. Although I can now say I live a happy life, my childhood was far from happy, filled with hardships. It all began when I was 10 years old. The father, who had been the central figure of the family, passed away due to illness. Until then, our family was just a normal, close-knit family of 4. Surrounded by a kind father and mother, and a sweet younger sister, I lived a life without any want. But everything crumbled suddenly when my father passed away due to illness. The first to go off kilter was my mother. She had always been mentally fragile, with severe mood swings, and sometimes she would lash out at my sister and me when irritated. As children, my sister and I were only shocked by our mother's sudden change, but our father always stopped her when he saw her raising her voice, so we never thought much of it. My mother was somewhat dependent on my father, so as soon as he intervened, she would calm down and cozy up to him. But then, he passed away. My mother's depression was severe. At one point, she couldn't do anything and would shut herself in her room all day, mentally broken down. In that state, she couldn't work properly and quit her part-time job to stay at home. Fortunately, the inheritance and life insurance left by my father were substantial. Moreover, my maternal grandparents, who had already passed away, were wealthy, and my mother had inherited a considerable amount of their estate. So, even though my mother was unemployed, our family didn't face financial troubles. However, my mother's behavior became increasingly strange day by day. She began to dote abnormally on my often ill and frail sister, Kristen. And she became stricter with me.
Mom, I'm hungry.
Annoying. I'm busy taking care of Kristen. Here's some money. Go buy yourself something to eat.
That was how my mother handled it, without cooking, just giving me money. But all she gave me was $2. I could only buy a snack, and I stopped having proper meals at home. Also, my mother used my sister's illness as an excuse to stop attending any of my school events.
I need to be by Kristen's side. I don't have time for your trivial events.
My mother said that and would even skip parent-teacher conferences, not to mention sports days or school performances. The school contacted us several times requesting her presence, but my mother dismissed them, claiming she needed to care for a sick family member. Looking back now, I realize how problematic my mother was. But at that time, she was still my only parent. And I loved my sister too and was worried about her frailty. So, I turned a blind eye to being neglected and convinced myself to endure whatever unreasonable things my mother said. I probably should have asked for help, but my maternal grandparents were both deceased, and my paternal grandmother, though still alive, was elderly and in a care facility. In such circumstances, with no other relatives to turn to, I never thought to rely on anyone else. While I was neglected by our mother, my sister adored me. I loved my dear sister too, and I believe we were what you'd call close sisters. My sister often said, "When I get better, I dream of becoming a hairstylist," as she played with my hair.
Kristen, you're amazing. I can't even do a simple braid.
Don't worry, I'll always do your hair for you.
Though often looking unwell, my sister's eyes sparkled and her complexion looked healthy when she played with my hair, appearing like a healthy girl. As time went by, my mother's treatment towards me escalated for the worse. Previously, she just neglected me, but then she started to verbally abuse me.
You really are an attractive child. Why don't you try to be more like Kristen? I don't need a daughter who isn't cute. Kristen is all I need.
Such words from our mother, denying my existence, hurt me at first, but gradually I got used to them and began to feel worthless. Moreover, I was often kept away from my beloved sister.
Kristen doesn't have much strength, so don't tire her out. What if she gets sick?
Every time my mother caught me in Kristen's room, she'd chase me out. My sister and I wanted to talk but couldn't. Instead, we communicated more with glances, eventually understanding each other's thoughts just by eye contact. When I looked into her eyes feeling relieved she seemed well, she'd make a face that seemed to say, "Thank you," or if she was hungry, I'd sneak her a cookie and she'd be overly delighted. Our secret communication was just between the two of us, strengthening our bond. However, my mother didn't like that we remained close despite her attempts to separate us, and her harassment and verbal abuse got even worse. Perhaps she disliked my curious and independent nature. My mother was the type who needed to feel needed by someone. While my father was alive, she felt fulfilled by devoting herself to him, but after his death, she lost her focus of devotion. To her, my frail sister was the perfect object of her care. In contrast, since I was little, I had been able to manage without relying much on her, and so she was unable to show me affection. Now that I'm an adult, I can analyze this calmly, but back then, I never thought about such things. I just felt lonely, neglected by my mother after losing my father. I kept telling myself that once my sister got better, my mother would start to care for me again. I spent each day desperately convincing myself of this. 2 years had passed since my father's death. On my 12th birthday, something I never imagined happened. When I returned home from school, the house was unusually quiet. Maybe, just maybe, my mother and sister were planning a surprise for my birthday. Upon arriving home, I briefly thought this might be the case. I decided to secretly find them hiding somewhere in the house to surprise them instead. So, I began to search quietly. However, no matter where I looked, I couldn't find my mother and sister. And upon closer inspection, I noticed that clothes and personal items were missing from their rooms. What on earth could this mean? My excitement quickly turned to panic. I searched the house again, but there was no sign of my mother and sister, and checking the calendar, it wasn't my sister's day for a medical appointment. Panicked, I rushed back to school and told my teacher everything as it was. At first, my teacher listened to my story with a look of shock, but his expression gradually hardened. After I finished telling everything, he contacted Child Protective Services. After explaining the situation and consulting with them, I was taken into temporary custody by Child Protective Services. I couldn't quite grasp the situation of my mother and sister suddenly disappearing, and my mind was in total chaos. One thing became clear: it seemed I had been abandoned by my mother. The realization made me feel like the world had gone dark before my eyes. Was my physically weak sister safe? What was my mother thinking when she left me? Various doubts and anxieties swirled around, and I silently cried in my bed. A few days later, I was called by the director of the Child Protective Services facility. Looking frail from anxiety and lack of sleep, he had sad news for me.
Rachel, from today, you'll be living here.
Those words confirmed that my mother had abandoned me. I had somewhat prepared myself during the days she hadn't returned, but the sadness still overwhelmed me and couldn't be stopped.
Why? Why did you leave me, Mom?
I was so sad. I cried loudly and uncontrollably. The director held me in his arms until I stopped crying. Life at the facility was comfortable and without hardships. In some ways, it was even easier since I didn't have to worry about meals like before. However, no matter how much I got used to living there, the loneliness and anxiety never disappeared, and I gradually became mentally exhausted. My interest in various things, which I had before entering the facility, faded, and the dark, quiet nights frightened me so much that I couldn't sleep. The director was very concerned about my increasingly emaciated appearance. He would talk to me and stay by my side to distract me, and even presented quizzes to entertain me. Talking with him was fun and took my mind off things, but when I was alone, I fell into brooding thoughts and spent many sleepless nights. Then one day, a turning point came. The director handed me a piece of paper with a smile.
You have a brilliant mind. You can be anything you want to be. You should see and listen to a variety of things.
What he handed me were the results of an IQ test I had taken earlier, which he had mentioned was just a quiz. Apparently, my IQ was higher than most people, and I was in the top few percent. Seeing the director more excited and happier than me opened my eyes. Because of being neglected and verbally abused by my mother, I had thought I was worthless. But the director praised me. That alone made me incredibly happy. Later on, I met a couple who wanted to become my foster parents. Wanting to take in someone else's child, I wondered if they were up to something. At first, although I didn't say it out loud, I was wary of them. But after several meetings, my wariness faded. They were genuinely good people and treated me like their real parent would. With gratitude, I eventually began to call them Mom and Dad. Years passed, and by my sophomore year in high school, my foster parents asked if I would become their child, and I joyfully agreed. Thus, we completed the adoption process and officially became a family. My time with my adoptive parents was filled with happiness. However, a few months after we became a family, my adoptive father suddenly fell ill. Fortunately, he was rushed to the hospital and the surgery was successful. But he had to stay in bed for a while, and my adoptive mother often looked worried. Seeing my adoptive parents like this reminded me of when my biological father died from an illness. My father gradually losing his vitality. My mother crying out in sorrow. And my sister, always frail, with a fleeting smile. I wanted to reduce the number of people saddened by illness, even if just by one. With that strong desire, I decided to pursue a career in medicine. I studied hard and was admitted to a prestigious university's medical school. Being naturally good at studying, I was able to enroll as a scholarship student. Becoming a scholarship student was a great relief, as I was worried about financially burdening my adoptive parents. I continued to study diligently at university and graduated as the valedictorian. I then passed the medical licensing exam and started working as a resident at a university hospital. My days were filled with learning and tense situations, as mistakes were not allowed when dealing with patients. Although busy and demanding, I found great fulfillment in my work. One day, while living like that, an astonishing event occurred. While I was working in the back area, a nurse from the reception came over. I thought it was about work, but what she said was completely unexpected. Someone is here to see you. I had no idea who it could be. Perhaps a patient I had treated before had come for a visit. With that guess, I left the back area, and there they were.
Rachel, it's been a while.
Mom. And Kristen. It was my biological mother and sister, whom I hadn't seen in 14 years. Moreover, my mother was waving at me with joy, and my sister was slumped over in a wheelchair. I was shocked and confused by this sudden encounter. What on earth was going on for her to come see me now of all times? I had a bad feeling about it, and it seemed it wasn't going to be just a brief chat. Quickly assessing the situation, I tried to remain calm and made an apologetic face, saying to them, "Sorry, I'll be free in about 30 minutes. Can you wait in the lobby until then?" I told them this.
Of course, come when you're ready.
My mother said cheerfully and left with my sister. Watching their backs, I felt intense anger towards my mother. After abandoning me, she now reappeared as if nothing had happened, acting all familiar. I had no idea what she was thinking, but I certainly had a bad feeling about it. Working through my mixed feelings, I rushed to meet them during my break. As soon as my mother saw me, her face lit up clearly. Overwhelmed by emotion and indignation, I confronted her. "Why are you here? More importantly, why now, after all this time?" Ignoring my cold gaze, my mother smiled brightly and responded,
I saw you on TV recently. I couldn't believe how accomplished you've become. It shocked me so much that I just had to come.
Indeed, about a year ago, I had discovered a rare medical case and presented it at a major conference with a renowned doctor. Since then, research on that disease had progressed, and recently there had been news that a treatment might be developed based on my findings. My mother had seen an image of me presenting at the conference on the news, and that's why she had come to see me.
Just like my daughter. I was so proud.
While my mother said this with a laugh, my heart grew colder. She had abandoned me unilaterally, and now, seeing my fame, she had turned around, trying to get close to me again, which made me nauseous. "Since you left that house, where have you been and what have you been doing all this time?" I barely managed to hold back from yelling at her in frustration and asked quietly instead. However, my mother ignored my question and said,
Actually, I have a favor to ask of you.
Despite being annoyed by her usual selfishness, I was more curious about what she could possibly want. Why is Mom coming all the way here? What kind of impossible demand is she going to impose on me this time? I wonder if it's something financial. As I braced myself for her request, it turned out to be unexpectedly simple.
It's nothing difficult. If you ever appear on TV or give lectures, I want you to introduce me as your mother.
What? What do you mean by that? I was baffled by her unexpected request and frowned. According to her, she had started searching for information about me on the internet after seeing me on TV. She had learned that I graduated as the valedictorian. Believing that someone so intelligent was bound to become famous, she saw an opportunity to position herself as the mother of a famous doctor. That's why she came to see me. I was confused about where such an idea had come from. There were so many things to question in her story, but the word mother particularly struck me. She had neglected and verbally abused me, and ultimately abandoned me, yet now she planned to act as if she had been a mother to me. Suppressing the anger rising within me again, I spoke plainly to her. I have adoptive parents who took me in and gave me all their love. They have been my true parents. You, who barely took care of me and abandoned me, I cannot see you as my mother. Therefore, I must decline your request. I said this firmly, and my mother's complexion changed.
Don't be insolent. I gave birth to you. You are legitimately my child. A child should simply listen to his or her mother."
Her face, which had been gentle moments ago, contorted into an ugly sneer as she yelled. When I was young, I was frightened by her yelling and had no choice but to obey or apologize, even when it made no sense. But now, I'm an adult. Having received so much love from my adoptive parents, I was no longer afraid of her. I wanted nothing to do with her ever again. With those feelings, I firmly told her off. "You are no longer someone who matters to me, so I don't need to listen to you. I thought we were already estranged. Please, just go home." Faced with my firm stance, my mother seemed taken aback. All I wanted was for her to give up and leave me alone. However, my only concern was my sister. Before my mother could take her away, could I possibly give her a medical examination? Turning to my sister, I saw her making eye contact like when we were children. When I looked into her eyes for the first time in years, it seemed like she was silently pleading for help, and I couldn't resist checking on her physical condition. Almost impulsively, I grabbed her wrist to check her pulse.
"What are you doing?"
My mother screamed at my sudden action, but I didn't care. The wrist of the sister I hadn't touched in years was unbelievably thin. As I stood shocked by its frailty, my sister spoke in a feeble voice strained with effort.
Rachel, I need to talk. I have something to say.
Sensing an urgent situation from her condition, I snatched my sister's wheelchair from my mother and rushed into an unused examination room nearby. Slamming the door shut and locking it, I heard my mother pounding and screaming from the outside.
"Stop messing around. Give Kristen back."
She was banging on the door hard enough to break it, but soon security arrived and seemed to take her away, and the room was enveloped in silence.
Wow, Rachel, it's been so hard.
My sister broke down in intense sobs. As I held her, tears streamed down my face as well. After she had calmed down from her crying, I listened to her story from the past 14 years. On the day they disappeared, my sister said our mother suddenly told her they were going out. When she mentioned that I wasn't around, our mother had assured her, "Your sister went ahead, she's waiting for us, it's fine." Of course, that was a lie, but my sister, believing her words at the time, followed her. However, the place they ended up was a strange and far distance from our home. And, obviously, I wasn't there. Realizing she had been lied to by our mother, my sister initially cried a lot from anxiety and loneliness. But each time, she was yelled at by our mother, and because it was so frightening, she gradually stopped crying. Spending her days trying not to provoke our mother, years passed. My sister had been frail as a child but seemed to have gradually grown stronger and was able to spend her days more energetically. Mother did not like this. She enjoyed being treated as the devoted mother nursing a sick daughter by those around her. To maintain this status, she first subjected my sister to psychological pressure to ensure compliance.
She would say things like, "If you don't listen, mommy will disappear, or then no one will take care of you." Kristen, almost every day. There was a lot of yelling too. Gradually, I felt like I couldn't survive without doing what mom said. I felt increasingly cornered.
My sister recounted with a bitter expression. Under such control by our mother, my sister wasn't allowed out of the house, had no contact with anyone, and was kept emaciated by being severely underfed. Furthermore, portraying my sister as sick, our mother did even worse by forcing her to ingest unnecessary amounts of medication to make her ill and call emergency services. At the hospital, she would say, "My daughter is unstable and has overdosed," and to neighbors, she lied, it was an attack of her chronic illness. As this repeated, suspicions arose among the people around her and the hospital, but before the lies were exposed, our mother took my sister and moved to another town like a night escape. My sister explained that for the past few years, she had been caught up in our mother's fabrications, repeated time and again. However, it seemed our mother was no longer satisfied with just being seen as the devoted mother caring for a sick daughter. At that time, she happened to see me on the news. She thought that me being famous must have widened my circle of acquaintances. Therefore, my mother apparently attempted to re-establish the connection with me, and to gain more sympathy by speaking about my sister in front of more people. Due to the pressure from our mother over the years, my sister had been unable to seek help from anyone. But seeing me after so long, she realized if she didn't ask for help now, she might never get another chance. So, she gathered the courage to reach out to me. While recounting her fears from those times, she sometimes trembled and eventually finished talking. I embraced her again. Thank you for telling me. From here on out, leave it to me. After calming her by stroking her head, I took out my smartphone and called the police. Leaving my sister there for a moment, I went to find our mother, who was likely restrained by security nearby. I found my mother and the security guard in a nearby lounge area, explained the situation to the guard, and asked him to keep her restrained until the police arrived. Then, turning back to my mother. After hearing my sister's story, I felt even more unforgiving towards her and scornfully spat out. I've heard everything from Kristen and called the police. No one will think of you as a devoted mother anymore. My mother, resigned and sitting on the floor, looked up in shock at my words, then silently hung her head. Glancing at her one last time, I returned to the examination room where my sister was waiting. Later, the police arrived, and after we provided our statements, they took our accounts and said they would conduct a thorough investigation. Following the police interview, I got my sister see an internal medicine physician just to be safe. The examination revealed that she did not suffer from an illness that required a wheelchair, her leg muscles were weak but she could walk without issue, and she was severely malnourished. It turned out the wheelchair was just part of our mother's performance to elicit more sympathy, forcing my sister into it unnecessarily. Indeed, my mother had been up to nothing good. My sister was hospitalized for a few days just to be safe, and after her discharge, it was decided that I would take her in. Even after her discharge, her physical functions remained generally weakened. Slowly and steadily, over a long period of recuperation, her health finally improved to that of an average person. Eventually, the mother, who had been detained by the police, faced trial and was sentenced to prison. I attended the court several times to testify, but my mother continued her selfish testimony. When I took the stand, her delighted declaration, "That's my daughter. She's a doctor," felt almost delusional. Thinking we would never see her again. Which brought a sense of immense relief, and my sister and I exchanged relieved glances. As her health improved, my sister began to talk again about her dream of becoming a hairdresser, just like before. Her face was clear and she smiled beautifully, making me feel incredibly happy that she could smile again. Now that she was surely okay, I decided to introduce her to my adoptive parents. Even though the meeting was still some time away, her nervous excitement was quite endearing. Amidst all the household upheaval, I successfully completed my residency program. Now working as a full-fledged doctor, I renewed my resolve to become a great physician, not just for my sister and my adoptive parents, but also in memory of my biological father who must be in heaven.